sometimes things in our lives stop us and make us remember ourselves. And so for me, my getting very sick, and I'm better now, but me getting really sick was a wake-up call, and it was my body and my spirit telling me, okay, Elisabeth, you love this job, but maybe you should find a different path.
This is Task, Time, Energy, the Purpose-Filled Productivity Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Miller. Welcome to the show. So one of the things that has made this podcast in some ways easy and kind of fun is that throughout my life, I've met quite a few unique people who have had interesting life experiences and interesting stories and have some great insights to share about, how we spend our time and how we can use our time to do things that are fulfilling and rewarding, or just things that we enjoy, living our lives in a meaningful way. And one of those awesome people that I know is my friend, Elisabeth Farnsworth Grant, who is here with us today.
Hello. Happy to be here, Scott.
Yeah, super cool to have this conversation with you. I'm glad to have you on the podcast. Mm-hmm. Elisabeth is a mom, an artist, a community advocate. You've been in the nonprofit sector for many years. You're now a recruitment specialist for the American Red Cross, where you help find, train, and support volunteers. You are here today, not in an official capacity, not speaking on behalf of your employer. Any opinions expressed are your opinions and not those of your employer. Official disclaimer there.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And you've worked for some other well-known nonprofit organizations in the past. You have an experience that I think maybe some of our listeners can relate to, where you were working while raising 3 kids, while also going to school. So juggling some bowling pins behind your back while you're spinning plates and just had a lot going on. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Going back just a little bit, I grew up just in an amazing family, the oldest of 6 kids, in a very religious household. And the tradition I was raised in was amazing. My parents always instilled in me a love of service and giving to the community. And that is the way they live their lives. And so that's the way I wanted to live my life as well. Some of the not as fortunate parts of that was a very heavy emphasis, particularly for women, to put husbands and families and marrying early. That was really part of the messaging that I was raised with and that I internalized. And it's not a bad way to live your life, going straight into a young marriage and starting children, if everything turns out the way it does in the storybook, but that is not life, right? So I supported my ex-husband. I supported him through all the years of undergrad, medical school, and surgical residency while having 3 children. And I taught piano lessons for some income on the side. So I absolutely love that. I'm a teacher at heart. That's what I do. And all was going fairly well. My husband and I actually eventually left that religious tradition, but I held on to some of the really wonderful core tenets of that, particularly service. My kids are in their 19 to 23 or 4 right now, so they're a little bit older now. But when my youngest started kindergarten, talking about time, I finally had the freedom and the time to pursue some of the things that I really wanted to do. So I had 2 semesters left of an undergrad degree in music education when I got married. And then I really supported my ex-husband and I didn't put my schooling first. I put his first. So I went back to school. I've always been artistic. I'm a painter and I do a lot of ceramics and mosaic work. And I jumped right into that. I started taking lessons again. I joined a studio. I started doing things that I hadn't allowed myself to do that fulfilled myself, and developing my own talents because I was really putting everything into everybody else, especially my family. When I was in that religious tradition, I was kind of told what to do with my service, and I was happy doing that. I always led music. I always did, all the things. But I found myself having the freedom to be able to say, oh, what causes and things do I care about in my community? And what talents do I have that can contribute to those? So I got extremely involved in the Arts Council. I got extremely involved. I cared about healthcare and education, art, health, education. So, finding those things that you really love and then tuning into the talents that you have. Found out I'm a great fundraiser. I could throw some events, and then I really jumped into being able to express myself artistically. And that was incredibly gratifying because I knew I had that in me, but I didn't develop it that much. And then people really responded to my artistic voice. I'm a bright, happy, colorful human being. And then I try for my art to reflect that.
Elisabeth, can I pause you here for a second?
Of course.
Maybe quite a few people listening to this can really relate to this, especially people who've come from certain religious backgrounds or family backgrounds that put an emphasis on this, where women in many traditions are expected to be the ones to, your job is to support the family and get married and have kids. And there's a lot of pressure. Women feel a lot of pressure to fulfill that role. Even in society in general, there's still that pressure there, even if you don't come from, necessarily a very conservative family. And for the people listening, Elisabeth is a wonderfully talented person, a wonderful painter, and a wonderful singer. I didn't know you played piano. This is something new I learned about you
today. You didn't know that?
I don't think I knew that. No.
What?
Yeah, I'm serious. See?
How did you not know that?
I don't know how I did not know this.
And I'm the kind of person that if you ask me to sing or you ask me to play the piano for you, I will 100% do that. And I love it. That's something that I can do. And, if I sing at church and it really lifts people up, that's my jam. I'm not ever the person who's going to be like, hey, let me do this for you, so a little bit like under the radar with some of my things. But yeah, I taught piano lessons for like 13, 14 years and loved it. As a teacher, just understanding, finding out how to crack that lock with a student and get them to be inspired to want to practice and find a song that is just a little bit challenging, but not too challenging, so they can start really, going for it because they're enjoying themselves. I love teaching.
Yeah.
And it was something that, that I could do. I could figure out how to do with 3 kids underfoot,
Right.
This is one little small thing. I had three sisters who live on our block. I taught them piano lessons. They would come first, and then they would stay for a little while to just keep an eye on my little babies. I also limited television time a lot. We did a lot of other things, but I limited television time to when piano lessons were going on. So the kids were like, oh, instead of asking, can I watch television? They would say, is it piano time? Because they knew that I would be like, all right, you can watch Elmo,
That's great.
So, that was one of those things that I did as a young wife. My husband at the time was a surgical resident. We had very little money. My children didn't even know that like a pizza came delivered to your house. I always made it fresh and made the dough. And, even at that time, we had home preschool, we had play groups, we had the library knew all of my children by name because we would go to story time all the time. Being a stay-at-home mother at the time, plus being a piano teacher, that required some time management as well to do that really well. I had 3 children under the age of 5. So figuring out how to do that and be active in, church. I still sang choir. I still did things, but, all of that requires just figuring out how all of those things fit in your life. And that is a hard thing when you have 3 young children. It does not relent. That is a hard job. And, but we had a good, I'm thankful for that time, but man, we were living in poverty. Yeah.
What are some of the things that you found that helped you manage all these responsibilities and activities and all these things that you were doing? You're a young mother taking care of these kids, and yet you have and also working, and you have your own things that you want to do. What helped you, do you think? Like, what are some of the lessons you learned, or techniques or tools or tricks that you think might be useful for other people to know?
You look at your day, and, as a mother with small children, we'll just talk about this phase of life. My afternoons and evenings were very packed because I was teaching piano lessons in the evenings. So I did a lot of things like meal prep in the morning, because I knew that in the evening it would be a little bit more chaotic with all the lessons and the soccer practice and all that stuff. So you look at your day, and I really used the skill later on, when I was going to school. You look at your day and you figure out, this is going to be the chaos time, but this is going to be the more quiet time. So say your children are, one's in preschool and then the other one's taking a nap. Well, you need to make sure you are doing well, but you also use that time to look at other parts of your day and see how a little bit of preparation can help make the other part of the day more smooth.
Did you find that this just kind of came naturally for you? Did it just make sense and you just started putting these pieces in place? Or did you have to sit down and write things out and make a plan or a planner or something as far as how you were going to organize your time?
Well, I've always been somebody who packed a lot in. Even in high school, I'll tell you a little bit about me, high school. So I was in every kind of extracurricular, not sports, but in band and choir, in whatever play was going on. And so even in high school, I had a calendar in my purse, and the other kids would be like, that's weird. But because I was also juggling a lot of the religion that I grew up in, I was at church at 6:30 in the morning every morning. I had perfect attendance for 3 years of the 4 years. I had the flu once, so I didn't have 4-year perfect attendance, and I just packed it all in. So I think of myself as a person who actually functions better. That's the key. Everybody's going to be different, but I function and am more efficient and do things if I take a little bit of time to look at my schedule, and you don't have to put every little thing in, but having a little bit of structure is good for me personally. And so even in a phase of life like being a mother of 3 young children, I still had some structure.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that innately when you have 3 children, somebody's going to have a meltdown. That's the challenge of parenting, both for puppies and children, but especially children, because you can't put them in a kennel. But
well, you can, but it's frowned upon.
Yeah,
very frowned upon, very socially unacceptable. You just said something interesting, and I have a question about it. You said you put some things on your calendar, not everything. How do you choose and decide, what's going to go on your calendar, what you're really going to plan for, and what you're not going to plan for?
Well, definitely those big things that are appointments that involve other humans. Like at the time when I was teaching lessons, that was non-negotiable. I needed to be there at those times. Commitments, those have to be on there. But then also things that we plan to go to story time this day. We plan to have preschool time with friends. That is something that for me went on my calendar. When you're in the working world now with the Red Cross, I've got my Outlook calendar, and it can be booked all day with different things. But even at those times, I found that I was more productive and efficient, and I think a better mother with interesting things for my kids to do and good interactions in the community, because we made a point of doing something interactive every day. It was a sacrifice in many ways financially for me to be at home with them, and I put off my own schooling and and my own career for that time. I don't know if I would go back and do that just because, but looking back, I'm really thankful that I was able to give my children that foundation.
Well, and it's interesting, we talk about prioritizing. You said things went on the calendar that are non-negotiable. So we have this story time appointment that we're going to. I have this piano lesson that I'm teaching. And then you just kind of schedule, other things around that, sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You also talked about planning for what some people might call unexpected or unfortunate. Like you have 3 kids, one of them's going to have a meltdown. So it sounds like that was kind of baked into your plan for the day, just expecting that certain things weren't going to work out as planned.
Yeah. And having a plan for those, like I'm all about emergency prep, especially being with the Red Cross, but I've always been about that. But even as a mother, you just think about at all times, I had an emergency kit in my car, snacks, water, diapers, change of clothes, and activities. That always has to be in the car. You don't have to bring it on your person all the time. But having a little bit of preparation for me makes me feel more secure. And I try to do that back then. I try to do it now. So having that preparation, like if there's a huge emergency, I've got a 72-hour kit. It's a bug out bag. I can grab that. I got one for the dogs and then, whatever else needs to happen, but you don't have to worry about in the heat of the moment, things happening. So I handled motherhood like that. I handled other phases of my life like that. I know that Scott is a very prepared person and we used to be amazed. Anything you needed, Scott had in a drawer and could get it. I might be like that with art supplies, but
that's high praise coming from you saying I'm well prepared, because I certainly don't always feel that way, but I know what you're talking about. So Elizabeth's husband, Ray, and I were roommates for a while. And there were a few times where like Ray said, "Oh, I need this thing." And I'd go, "Oh, wait, I have one of those." And I'd just go in my closet and grab it because I happen to know that I just randomly happen to have this thing, and it became a running joke. But definitely I know that from just from us knowing each other for so long that, yeah, you have that talent for being well prepared, and for, planning ahead and just taking the time in advance to think about what you might need, and then just taking however little bit of time it takes to put that together so that you have it. And so in the heat of a moment when something goes wrong, you're not, scrambling to prepare for it. And how long does it take to do something like that? Like, let's just take the example of a little emergency kit for the kids in the car. So we've got the snacks, we got the activities. How long does it take to put together something like that?
Maybe 30 minutes.
Which I think, some people are going to hear that and go, "Oh, how could I ever take 30 minutes to do that?" But if you find that quiet time when the kids are, taking a nap or whatever, and then you invest the time in doing that, then when there's an emergency, it's not as stressful. And then I imagine that just becomes a habit. Oh, let me put the, another juice box back in the emergency kit.
Mm-hmm.
And also maybe in thinking about that, like the thing that comes to mind for me is like, oh, 30 minutes. Do I have time to 30 minutes to put together something like that? But then I think, well, I spent 30 minutes this morning surfing Reddit while I was drinking my coffee. So maybe I could have, done something else.
Yep. I mean, it's going to take you 30 minutes to hunt down a snack for kids while they're screaming. So you might as well do it. Yeah. I mean, you've been camping with me. We have our bins and we love camping. Part of camping that's a deterrent is that you have to gather so much stuff. But if we have it in bins ready to go, it's easy for us to hit the road and go camping and do things enjoyable. Yeah, I saw you eyeing the bins.
Oh, yeah. I had huge admiration for your camping bins when we go camping. Yeah. One thing you said, though, it's such an astute observation is when things go wrong and we have no choice, we'll spend 30 minutes running around like a chicken with our head cut off, trying to find the thing we need. And yet when we think, oh, let me take 30 minutes in advance when things are calm to plan for that. No, that seems like too much time, right?
Yeah. I was kind of raised with parents who did that. And so that was like one of those cool things that I took away, like just being prepared for things. And yeah, if you think about it in a time investment sort of thing, it's a way to invest your time, to do a little bit of forethought. You can't predict or prevent all chaos from happening, but sometimes if it's something like you need a juice box, you're going to have that. So that's something that I've always used as a coping skill in the inevitably chaotic time of being a young mom.
And it sounds like you're saying we can't plan for everything, but we can plan for the most likely forms of chaos that will happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're talking about coming from this, very conservative background where you had a very clearly defined role as a woman, and that was, impressed upon you, and you felt like, your job was to fulfill that role. Part of your journey has been branching out from that and kind of discovering who you are as a person and what's satisfying to you as a person. And it's interesting. It sounds like your love of art and music and teaching was part of what started you on that journey. You were talking about that a little earlier once your youngest was in kindergarten. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Oh, yeah. So, when my youngest started in kindergarten, all three kids were in elementary school. And for the first time in my adult life, I had a little bit of freedom. And so I definitely did. I looked and I said, I never got to finish that degree. So I jumped into that. Now, I definitely still did all of the things while the kids were getting ready for school, cleaning up, multitask to kind of free up some time for me to explore the things that I really wanted to. That's when I really, really jumped headfirst into nonprofit, supporting causes. I knew some talents that I had. I developed other talents that were very useful. I jumped into marketing. Kind of a little bit further along, I ended up being the marketing director for the Arts Council. That's what I did while I was in school. Again, figuring out those ways to efficiently do that. There's juggling a lot of balls, but having a system in place, for that particular job, it was what shows are coming up that I need to promote, what educational opportunities, what art exhibits are coming up. And it was very motivating to me because art feeds my soul in so many ways. And then I quickly realized the better I could do that job, the more efficiently I could learn how to get messaging out and put it in the right places and in front of the right eyes, the better I could, in that case, support the Arts Council and help people take advantage of awesome opportunities and, support the artists and support a better community. I was technically supposed to be part-time at that job. Around that time, at the time, unfortunately, but now I fortunately went through a divorce. That wasn't the right relationship for me. And that allowed me to have the freedom to further explore who I was and live for what made me happy and also just, really figure out how I could give to the world. So I went back to school thinking I would be education because I'm such a teacher person. But as I was in that position, I really found a voice in my voice. So I was able to really figure out, I'm working for a nonprofit. We have like a tiny budget. So how do you figure out how to get your message to the right people? I would show up with flyers for the church pews at different churches. I would show up at community centers. I would show up in all different places because my motivating factor is like, who would love to be a part of this? And then how do I get that information to them? But all of that was a challenge because, at that point, I was at ECU and I live in Wilson, North Carolina. So that's about almost an hour to get to campus. So I had to figure out how to make all that work. So, I drop off all the kids at the 3 different schools, head straight to ECU, do my classes. I was way overdressed over there because I'm wearing work appropriate clothes. My boss worked with me. He knew that I was good. He knew that I would do excellent work. And he said, just don't schedule your meetings for when you have to be in class. So I had a flexible schedule, but it was a lot. 3 school-age kids, all of their activities, and trying to write papers, trying to commute over to school, and then, having a pretty demanding job. Trying to figure out how to make sure everybody's okay was definitely when I think, when we talk about time management, that is when I really had to lean into time management. And then somehow figuring out some space for my own personal needs as I was taking care of everybody. So I certainly did a lot of, oh, I have time when I'm driving. I would have recordings of classes. So I could basically study while I'm driving. What can I do for meal prep that I can do quickly and easily and still have healthy meals? One afternoon, I would do as much meal prep as I could. So I would have a plan. And I don't do that as much now, but at that time, it was critical for me. Even the smallest thing, this sounds like so small, but I stopped matching socks. Instead of like sitting there and folding all the laundry, I said, you know what? I'm sitting here trying to sort all these socks and match them. And it's taking 30 to 40 minutes out of my week that I don't have. So then I just like, well, here's the basket, find some socks. And that is fine. So the mother I was before and the level that I personally held myself to like keeping my house straight and all that stuff, I had to let go of some of that. And that's okay. That's actually necessary. The basket of socks was like a symbol for me. And I know it sounds random, but find your basket of socks. Like it really doesn't matter if a kid is going to have to find a match to their own socks or go without. Who cares? Find the things that will save you a little bit of time that aren't the absolute critical thing.
I love that. That is the theme now for this podcast episode, is find your basket of socks.
Yeah.
It ties in with a recurring idea that comes up again and again in these conversations, which is that often our desire for perfection gets in the way and holds us back. Like there are some things absolutely that we would love to do perfectly, and our value in doing things perfectly at times, but it becomes a matter of prioritization. What is important to do as perfectly as possible and what isn't? And I love the socks example, right? Like finding your basket of socks, finding the thing that you're spending time on that can be done faster or easier and to take less time, because ultimately at the end of the day, it doesn't make a difference whether you got to go fishing through a laundry basket to find a pair of matching socks or whether they're all neatly folded, right?
That was one of those many examples. The food prep thing. You dirty a bunch of dishes at once, you chop all the vegetables, you do that, you have at least a plan for several meals. And then, you're not as tempted to go to McDonald's, but you can go, okay, here's supper.
Mm-hmm.
Little things like that. Each person has to find what those things are, but they are reoccurring duties or things that need to happen. How can you make that go more smoothly? When my kids were doing their homework, I was writing papers,
Even with the meal prep, you're looking for just simple, quick meals that are nutritious, right? Yeah. Again, maybe that's an area where it doesn't have to be perfect. Every once in a while, we'll cook a really nice, every once in a while, we'll go camping with Scott and Lauren and we'll make a really nice feast there at the campground, right? Like we'll take the time to make something really nice. Hint, hint. When are we going camping again, Elisabeth? When are we get some of your good campfire cooking again?
So I love to throw down in the kitchen. So I need to make that when I want to throw down and show my love to people by throwing down in the kitchen. But for everyday survival during phases in your life when I was trying to juggle all of those things, it becomes the basket of socks. It's like, okay, what do you have to do? You're still going to feed your kids. You need to make that happen, but how can you make that happen in an efficient way? And so it takes that stress level out a little bit, but it requires a little bit of just looking again, evaluating your week, evaluating those stress points and figuring out what that needs to look like.
Yeah. Again, priorities. This doesn't have to be a great feast for our friends. It's just, this is what we're going to eat and let's keep it simple and healthy, and nutritious. Yeah. You mentioned multitasking, and you gave one example of multitasking, which is driving in the car, and then you had class recordings, so you could listen to class recordings while you're driving in the car, which makes sense because a lot of us are going to listen to something while we're driving in the car. And so why, instead of talk radio or, music, I mean, sure, if you want, but maybe every once in a while or a lot because you need to, make it something that is going to be helpful. What's another example that you would consider an example of multitasking for you?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess I just back to that phase, I mean, I spent a lot of time in the parent pickup line, and I knew that. So I made sure, I had something that I needed to read. Again, just planning ahead of time, having those things. So I knew I would have about 30 to 40 minutes. I'm sitting there in the parent pickup line. So then I had whatever I needed to study right at hand. Some people function well with multitasking and some people don't. I function almost better when I have something engaging me at all times. That might be a little bit of ADD, just, filling all that. But yeah, so for me, I'm bored out of my mind if I'm just sitting there. But knowing, okay, I need to read this book, I need to study this, using those pockets of time that, yeah, you could be playing a game on your phone, but you could also just be knocking out something. And the more you can do that in a healthy way, it's a way of life to just kind of figure out when those pockets of time that you can incorporate those things.
I think when people talk about multitasking, it's useful to think, well, what do we actually mean by multitasking? Because I think there are forms of multitasking that actually make us less productive. And this has been demonstrated time and time and time again. If you're in a meeting with a bunch of coworkers and you actually need to participate in that meeting and actually contribute or pay attention to what's going on, and you're sitting there answering emails in the Zoom meeting or looking at your phone in an in-person meeting, and then all of a sudden you're asked to participate and you're not engaged in the conversation, so everybody else has to wait for you to catch up. That's not productive. And I think that's the kind of multitasking that some people think they should be doing, when again, time and time again, it's demonstrated that's not helpful. But you talk about finding time where you can multitasking isn't going to interfere with the one task that you're doing. Like you're sitting in line in a car, you're going to be there for a while. Mm-hmm. You're not driving on the highway, right? You're sitting parked, basically waiting for the car in front of you to move. So yeah, you could be reading something at that time. It's not taking away from the primary task.
I was doing marketing for the Arts Council. I could be posting content on different platforms. We can do that from our phone now.
Right.
So it's finding those tasks. I had already created content. You have to be extremely meticulous when you're putting information out there for people to consume and take advantage of opportunities. But yeah, if I said, okay, I'm going to create the content and then I'm going to have 30 or 40 minutes in the car, that's a manual task to put that content on different formats. But yeah, not when you need to be present for something. It's finding that downtime, but also paying attention to sometimes you need that downtime to be downtime. I actually, for the most part, did not do schoolwork on the weekends, unless it was just like some big thing, because I needed to have a break. So I could work as hard as I could during the week. I could stay up, late if I needed to, or for me, I like to wake up super early, get things done. But on the weekends, I allowed myself to decompress. I wanted to say that here because understanding yourself and what you need and building in, even scheduling that time to feed yourself, whether it's art, whether it's hanging out with friends, particularly as a single mother, you don't have a spouse at home with you. And intentionally building in time to connect with other people and other adults is critical. You have to be intentional about it. I mean, we know we'll go like a month without talking and we don't want that to happen, but you get busy and wrapped up in your life. But at that time, it wasn't just, oh, I really want to do this. It was critical for my survival. It was critical for me at that time, like going to therapy and healing myself and doing things like getting a pedicure and spending time painting. If I just left it up to chance with everything I had going on, it wouldn't happen. But I prioritized those things that would help me be healthy. And then I could turn around and give my best to my children, to my school, to my job. And that is like the only way I think I got through any of that.
I think it's great to hear you say that because you have somebody who is trying to do so many things, trying to accomplish so many things in their life and really struggling and sometimes eventually burning out, crashing, running into a brick wall because they're not recharging their batteries. They're not taking breaks. And when you start talking to somebody about it, very often they'll say, well, I just feel guilty taking breaks. Or, I feel like I haven't really earned it yet. And on the other side, talking to someone like you who has, we're hearing all these stories about all these different responsibilities that you're balancing and dropping the kids off and then listening to lessons while you're driving in the car and working for the nonprofit and taking classes. You're balancing all these things and being able to do it for so long. And like you said, being able to give your best to people and being able to give your best to the work that you do. It's again and again, I hear people who are able to do that and do it so well talk about how important it is to take time for themselves and to do the things that they need to care for themselves and things that they enjoy so that they're recharging their batteries. And so they're able to give their best. And just that difference, it comes out so often, between, oh no, I feel guilty taking a day off. I can't take a day off. And then pretty soon you have to because you're flat on your back, and can't move. Versus, yeah, of course, I'm going to take time for myself. Yeah, I'm going to take time to be around other adults. And that's how you're able to do the things that you want to do and do them well for a prolonged period of time, for the long haul.
Which I'm not always good at, but I did learn that, it's important to do that. So when my next role, I was the executive director for Habitat for Humanity in Wilson, which is a pretty sweet job right out of college, right? I'm just kidding. But, that came about again because I jumped into the community and I figured out I could talk to anybody. And if I care about the cause, I can encourage somebody to give and I can be organized. And that role was incredibly difficult because I was a sole administrative staff. I had employees at the restore, but all of the fundraising, all of the, we take care of mortgages, all of the supporting families. I had committees, but I was really the person who had to hold that together. And ironically, in some ways, even though that time in my life on paper might have been a little less chaotic because I wasn't trying to juggle the many different things, I lost sight of, I would work 7 days a week for that job, And one of the things that we talked about maybe hitting on is that, I find a lot of personal gratification and purpose in supporting nonprofits that I care about. And that is obviously a wonderful cause. I loved our families. I could see the clear benefit in their lives from home ownership and just that the whole program. It was amazing. And many of us, we have jobs that there's more to do than you have time to do it. And so figuring out how to make all of it work is a challenge. So I actually really lost sight of that during the years that I was there. I eventually actually got pretty sick. I think I could really, really pinpoint my lack of taking care of myself and setting those clear boundaries. And I'm still single mom, 3 kids, trying to do all the other things, and then trying to run an organization that I cared about so much. So I would throw everything into it, but I was forgetting me. And sometimes things in our lives stop us and make us remember ourselves. And so for me, my getting very sick, and I'm better now, but me getting really sick was a wake-up call, and it was my body and my spirit telling me, okay, Elisabeth, you love this job, but maybe you should find a different path, and maybe you should figure out something that has better balance. Because oftentimes, professionally and personally, we get into too much and the expectations are not realistic for our energy, for our time. And it takes a lot of strength to say no. It takes a lot of strength to set personal boundaries. And it takes a lot of strength to be able to prioritize the really necessary things, because you can't operate well if you're not doing those things. If you're not making yourself a priority, you cannot give everything to everybody else. So that was definitely an amazing job that I learned so much. I'm so super proud of the leaps and bounds that organization took when I was there, and the blessing that that I felt like, I was part of giving those families. But, it's also okay, even if you find incredible worth and value in a role or something that you're doing, it's okay to pivot and say, wait, this is not a sustainable amount of energy that I can devote, because it's affecting me in other ways, whether it be health or relationships or just losing track of your priorities.
Yeah. And I think that happens a lot for people who, in the nonprofit sector,
Mm-hmm.
even people who are doing, for-profit work, but work that is really meaningful to them. And I've had that experience, exactly what you're talking about, very, very similar, of doing work that was really, really meaningful to me and important and that I enjoyed. And yet I wasn't taking care of myself.
Yeah.
I was so focused on the job and doing what I needed to do to succeed and to help other people, that I didn't realize how little I was taking care of myself, how poorly I was taking care of myself. And that's not sustainable. And sometimes sooner or later, you're going to realize that you need to take care of yourself and make some changes, or your body will tell you, or your mind will tell you, or your life will tell you, hey, something has to change. Elisabeth, this has been a great conversation, and it's wonderful for you to share all this. I think there are a lot of things that people who are listening to this will be able to relate to in their own lives, and some great ideas, some great maybe lessons that people can take away. I always like to ask a question at the end of these episodes, and so I'm going to ask you that same question. What is your dream right now?
Should have come with an answer. Well, my dream is a continuation of the path that I feel like I'm on, but hopefully to expand it. So I have been blessed, and I've developed certain talents, and I've been able to use those to make good impacts in the world. Again, whether it's art, whether it's teaching, whether it's teaching other people how to do marketing. I do a lot of that still. Whether it's in my current role at the Red Cross, that I find so incredibly meaningful. I mean, my job is literally to connect with volunteers and figuring out the best way for them to give back. And so that is incredibly great, because I'm working with the people who want to get back. So my dream is that I've lived this life making a big difference for good, and making this world just a better place where people get up off their seats and do something for other people, because that's just one of the ways I've found a lot of meaning in my life. And so I've certainly found a direction in my life encouraging other people to do that. So that's my dream, is that I can maybe look back at the end of this time in my life, look back at my life and go, I've encouraged people. I've not only served myself, but I've encouraged other people to look within themselves to give to the world. And, it's not only our impact, but encouraging other people to find their unique ways that they can just pay it forward. I know we need a lot more of that on this planet. And so that's what keeps me going. So my dream is that I did a great job doing that.
That's a wonderful dream. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Absolutely. All of us are on a journey. We're all dealing with the hurdles that life sends our way. But it's how we handle those situations, and then we get out of ourselves, and then we look into the world and see how we can make an impact. So that's what I try to do. It's a journey every day, right?
It is. Well, thank you very much for being a guest on our podcast. And I look forward to hanging out with you and Ray again sometime soon.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it.
You can see some of Elisabeth's wonderful art on her Facebook page. That's facebook.com/efarnsworthart. And I'll put a link to that page in the show notes in the description for this episode. Elisabeth has succeeded as a student, as a professional, and as a mom. And if you've done any of those things, you know how challenging they can be sometimes. And maybe you've tried some of the time management techniques that Elisabeth described, like meal prep or like planning out your week in advance. But maybe you're having a hard time making that work as well as you'd like it to. As a personal and professional development coach, I enjoy helping people improve their time management skills and find solutions that are going to work for them, which aren't necessarily the same solutions that work for everyone else. So if you'd like to talk about that, check out my website, scottmillercoaching.com, or send me an email. It's scott@scottmillercoaching.com. Thanks again for listening. Remember to like or follow or subscribe or click whatever that button is on your podcast player. And come on back and join us for another episode. Until then, take care. And thanks again for listening.